Tonight, Marcus Day speaks out after his son is extradited to the U.S. to face child pornography charges. Pollster Peter Wickham says Prime Minister Alan Shasley would be wise to call the general election sooner rather than later. And students voice their excitement and concerns ahead of the reopening of school on Monday. The details of these stories and more are coming up.
This is the Hot 7 Nightly News with Lovelace and Amy Joseph.
Good night. It is Friday, the 4th of September 2020. Welcome to the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. I'm lovely St. Amy Joseph. Thank you for joining us. The incumbent Jamaica Labour Party clinched a resounding victory in Thursday's general election. Although the COVID-19 pandemic shadowed the general election, the JLP's victory was the largest margin for a political party in Jamaica since 1997, when the Prime Minister, P.J. Patterson, led the PNP to a 50-10 win. The last time the JLP won this big was in 1980. Given Jamaica's election results and the results of other Caribbean elections, is it safe to say that a clear trend has emerged? And is it also safe to assume that in the case of St. Lucia, the administration should take its cue from these countries and call an election even as the country manages COVID-19? Respected pollster Peter Wickham says it is a definite yes to both of those questions. Respected regional pollster Peter Wickham says Prime Minister Alan Shasley would be wise to call the election sooner rather than later. Speaking against the backdrop of recent Caribbean elections that have all favored the incumbent, the most recent being the victory of the Jamaica Labour Party on Thursday, the 4th of September, Wickham says the general rule in politics holds true. In times of disaster, the odds are in the favor of the incumbent.
Yeah, no, lovely. It's a proposition I agree with. We've had now 3 elections, which would be St. Kitts, we had Trinidad and Tobago, we have Jamaica. Of course, there was Suriname before that. But if we take those 3, we saw situations in which all 3 incumbents maintained office. The general principle in politics is that natural disasters tend to favor the incumbent. And what we're seeing with COVID is a very unpredictable long-term scenario, and it makes sense in that environment for governments to pull up the election because there's a whole lot more you can do to win it now than you can later. So clearly there seems to be a trend. It seems to have helped all 3 incumbents in those situations. The voter turnout appears to have been very low, but in the case of Jamaica, that made no difference.
In St. Lucia's case, a general election is constitutionally due by 2021. However, speculation has been rife that a snap election will be called by the Prime Minister sometime this year. Others argue that the government will go into 2021 to buy itself some time to deliver on its promises and some of its larger-scale projects, like the construction of St. Jude Hospital. In Wickham's professional opinion, the time is ripe for a general election in St. Lucia.
Certainly, if Prime Minister Chastity is paying attention and he has an election which is due next year, it would make a lot of sense for him to get on with it and have the election sooner rather than later, especially when you bear in mind the fact that the long-term impacts of COVID, with people being out of work, the potential for that to run into the next winter tourist season is very high. And those factors are factors that cannot be easily managed. So yes, I think that the elections are very encouraging and they would send a signal to Prime Minister Chastity. And certainly if I were to advise him, I would say it would make sense to call the election sooner rather than later.
The opposition St. Lucia Labour Party has indicated that it fully expects the general election to be called in 2020. The leader of the Lucian Greens political party, Andre de Caries, has also stated that the writing is on the wall that government will call a snap election this year. With only 4 months to go until the end of 2020, St. Lucia is likely to be in election fever very soon. WFTV-9 reported on Wednesday that a former U.S. Marine who fled to St. Lucia in 2014 while facing child pornography charges in Volusia County was returned to Central Florida Wednesday. Deputies say Sebastian Marcus Day, aged 27, left DeLand in 2014 and traveled to the Caribbean island of St. Lucia just after the sheriff's office executed a search warrant at his home, leading to 25 counts of possession of child pornography. The sheriff's office says deputies spent the next few years working with the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs to have Day extradited back to the U.S., but that request was denied in 2018, as at the time St. Lucia did not consider Day's conduct in the county a crime. Later that year, St. Lucia modified its computer misuse laws to criminalize possession of child pornography with intent to distribute, clearing the way for Day to be returned to the U.S. The extradition was completed this week after Day had a petition to overturn it denied. After 6 years on the run, Day was returned to Orlando Wednesday and taken to Volusia County Jail to be charged with all 25 counts of child porn possession. He is being held there on no bond. Meanwhile, his father, Marcus Day, has issued a statement on the matter. He posted this statement on Facebook. We are not going to read the statement in its entirety, but here are some excerpts of that statement posted to Facebook, again by Marcus Day. Genevieve Gonzaga reads the statement.
Quote, in November 2019, Sebastian was arrested in St. Lucia on an extradition warrant and brought before a magistrate. Rather than agree that the charge was not extraditable, the AG's office sought further clarification from VCSO, asking if the files had been distributed, making it a crime under St. Lucian law. This was despite the charge being solely possession. The response from VCSO was that the files were in a folder that were available for sharing. They did not say the files had been shared, only that they could have been. The AG's request to VCSO implied that for St. Lucia to comply with the extradition request, distribution was required. At no time was Sebastian charged with any other crime than possession, and yet our AG's office went out of their way to see if distribution was alleged, despite knowing that the charge was clearly stated on the extradition papers, possession of child pornography. VCSO would have stated that the software used to record a file-sharing episode if it had occurred. The best VCSO could offer was to state the files resided in a folder available for sharing, a default installation setting of the program. He further went on to state the Royal St. Lucia Police Force seized Sebastian's laptop on which no porn was found, further emphasizing that Sebastian was not an offender in St. Lucia despite being treated as a convict from the first court hearing. The government of St. Lucia sent my son to Florida to serve what could be a multi-decade sentence because at the age of 20 he got caught up in a sting operation targeting child predators. My son is a young black man who lived for a short while in DeLand, Florida, assisting at first with the convalescence of an old and dear family friend, and then later settling into a community of seniors who he assisted. Like many of our children who settle in the white man's country, he experienced racism for the first time. He called me the first time he was called boy like it was a joke. It was as in the police pulling up and saying, "Boy, what are you doing here?" when he was jogging in the morning. I warned him to be careful and reminded him of the talk I gave all my mixed-race children when they traveled to the U.S. Extradition to the U.S. with the all-too-numerous cases of racial disparities and the overrepresentation of people of the African diaspora in the criminal justice system in the USA and the severity of the sentencing when compared to white Americans must be seen as a very serious matter not to be rushed. The unseemly haste in which my son was whisked away leaves many questions unanswered. It almost seemed as they took the joy and pleasure in ripping my son from me in contravention of a stay. End quote. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Genevieve Gonzaga.
Marcus Day has indicated that the Facebook post is the official statement of his family on this matter at this time. No further comments have been made. In other news, Raquel Duboulay-Chasney recently sat down with Hot 7 to speak about her fundraising efforts to benefit police and fire officers. During that interview, we asked her about the portrayal of her husband, Prime Minister Alan Chasney, as being separate and apart from average St. Lucians. Several racial comments have been made, all suggesting that Alan Chasney does not identify with being St. Lucian, nor is he a part of what is distinctly St. Lucian. Raquel Duboulet-Chasney says nothing could be further from the truth.
In a recent sitting of the Parliament, Government MP Edmund Estefan lamented that Prime Minister Alan Chasney had come under vicious and racist attacks that aimed to paint him and his family as being racist and portraying a concept of otherness when it comes to Chasney and his family, whether based on race, social and financial status. The rhetoric, which questions how much the Prime Minister identifies with being St. Lucian, has intensified as speculation is rife that a snap election call is imminent and the atmosphere grows thicker with political tension. In an interview with Hot 7 TV on Thursday, Raquel Duboulet-Chasney, wife of Prime Minister Alan Chasney, was questioned about the portrayal that she and her family are different and separate from the people of St. Lucia.
Well, my family and Alan's family are two of the oldest families in St. Lucia. We've always been around. I mean, before anything else, we're both St. Lucian, and we're very proud of that. I've never felt other. I've never gone anywhere and been made to feel other. I think sometimes there is a perception, if people don't know me, I get this comment all the time, and it always throws me, and they say things to me like, hey, you're really down to earth, you're really a nice person. I'm thinking, but why would you have thought that I'm not? And I think there's a perception sometimes that I'm going to treat people differently than I do.
Duboulet-Chasney says while she has had a measure of financial security, she embraces people from all walks of life and has had very diverse social interactions throughout the course of her life.
I've had a certain amount of privilege in my life in the sense that I never had to worry where my next meal would be coming from. But I've always felt that I was just an average St. Lucian person. And this position that I'm in now, nothing in my life has changed fundamentally, and that I still live in the same place, still have the same job, I still have to work for a living. But at the end of the day, you are more visible, and there's an expectation in terms of your time that sometimes can be difficult to meet. Because if you don't go to something because you're tired or you have 3 conflicts on the same night, sometimes people feel let down that you are not able to make it. But until they can figure out how to clone us, I think we're stuck with sometimes not being able to meet everyone's expectations. But I certainly do try as hard as I can.
The Duboulet family has owned and operated Duboulet Bottling Company for many years and also amassed wealth in areas of real estate. Duboulet-Chasney is an attorney by profession who owns the law practice Duboulet, Anthony & Co. Interestingly enough, she owns the law practice with the daughter of former Prime Minister and Vieux-Fort South MP Dr. Kenny Anthony.
With schools slated to reopen on Monday, Hot 7 took to the streets to find out from students how they feel about returning to class.
Schools are slated to reopen on Monday 7th. Parents and their children are busy making last-minute preparations for back to school. Hot 7 spoke to students to find out how excited they are to be returning to school.
I'm prepared for school, but I'm not excited because of the pandemic.
Yes, I'm prepared for school.
And how excited are you to go back?
I'm very excited to see my friends, and I'm going to see my teacher and all the stuff.
I'm excited about learning and getting an education so that when I grow up I would have a good job, and I'm excited also to meet my friends.
I'm very excited.
What is so exciting about going back to school right now?
I get to meet a new teacher. I get to meet my friends, even though I don't get to play with them and touch them and hug them. And I get to have fun.
Are you excited to be going back to school?
Yes.
What is so exciting about going back to school?
Well, I miss my friends, playing with them, that's why.
I'm very excited to go back to school because it's a long time I never learned. So I'm ready to go back to school.
Those were their responses. These little ones seem super excited to be back at school. Reporting for Hot 7 News, I am Genevieve Gonzague.
This is the Hot 7 TV Nightly News. Still to come, hear why Dr. Ernest Hilaire says he is unbothered about the UWP's prospective candidates for his constituency. Hot FM Communications Limited takes on the Jerusalem Challenge as part of anniversary celebrations. That and more coming up after the break.